The Los Angeles sky glowed in hues of deep orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Keanu Reeves walked quietly through a residential neighborhood, his hands tucked into the pockets of his black jacket. The streets were peaceful, lined with neatly trimmed hedges and the occasional flicker of porch lights turning on for the evening. But something was off. A thick column of black smoke curled into the sky from a house just down the block. At first, Keanu thought it might be from a backyard barbecue, but as he got closer, he saw the unmistakable glow of fire flickering inside the windows. Then he heard it. Frantic barking, a dog's panicked yelps echoed through the neighborhood, piercing through the growing commotion. Neighbors stood frozen on the sidewalk, some shouting for help, others fumbling with their phones to call 911. The fire had already spread to the second floor, and the structure groaned as the flames ate away at the wooden frame. Keanu didn't hesitate. Breaking into a sprint, he ran toward the house, ignoring the warnings of bystanders. "Sir, don't go in there," someone shouted, but he wasn't listening. His eyes locked onto the small figure behind a ground-floor window. A golden retriever, its paws scratching desperately at the glass. Trapped inside, Keanu grabbed a nearby metal chair and swung it hard against the window. The glass shattered, sending shards cascading to the floor. A wave of smoke burst out, stinging his eyes and throat, but he forced his way inside. The heat was suffocating, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Coughing, Keanu dropped low, scanning the room. The dog whimpered, its eyes wide with fear as it backed away from the broken window. "It's okay, buddy," Keanu soothed, crawling toward the trembling animal. "I got you." The dog hesitated, then, as if sensing safety, leaped into Keanu's arms. He wrapped his jacket around the retriever, shielding it from the smoke, and turned to make his escape. That's when he saw it. Through the haze, a door in the back of the room stood slightly ajar. A faint glow seeped from within. Not fire, but something else. Inside, he could make out metal shelves lined with what looked like stacks of old files, electronic equipment, and something that resembled surveillance monitors. His instincts screamed that this was no ordinary house fire. But the flames roared louder, and Keanu knew he had no time to investigate. With one last glance at the mysterious room, he sprinted toward the broken window and climbed through, landing on the grass with the dog still clutched in his arms. The crowd erupted in cheers. Firefighters arrived seconds later, rushing past him to battle the blaze. Keanu sat on the curb, catching his breath, the retriever nestled safely beside him. He had saved the dog. But as he looked back at the inferno, a lingering thought gnawed at him. What had he just stumbled upon? Keanu moved swiftly through the burning house, ducking low to avoid the thick smoke curling toward the ceiling. The heat was suffocating, pressing against his skin like an invisible force, but he pushed forward, his only focus on the frantic barks echoing from somewhere deeper inside. Through the dim glow of the fire, he spotted the golden retriever huddled in the farthest corner of a back room. Its body trembled, eyes wide with panic, but it was unharmed. "There you are," Keanu breathed, relieved. He crouched down, extending a steady hand. "Come here, buddy. Let's get you out of here." The dog hesitated, pawing at the floor as if torn between fear and trust. Keanu inched closer, his movements slow and deliberate despite the urgency of the fire. Finally, the retriever whimpered and lunged forward, pressing its warm body against him. "That's it," Keanu murmured, scooping the dog into his arms. "I've got you." Just as he turned to leave, a glint of light caught his eye. Something unusual in the flickering glow of the fire. A door at the back of the room stood slightly ajar. The crack between it and the frame revealed a faint blue glow, completely out of place in a house engulfed by flames. Keanu hesitated. The logical part of his brain told him to get out, but his instincts, sharp from years of stunt training and action roles, told him there was something worth seeing inside that room. Holding the dog close, he nudged the door open with his foot. The air was cooler inside. The fire hadn't touched this space yet. The walls were lined with metal shelves stacked with old yellowed files and maps curled at the edges. A large metal desk sat against the far wall, covered in electronics. Several small monitors flickered with static, while wires snaked across the floor. It looked like a surveillance room. But why? And for whom? Keanu's mind raced. Was this house some kind of hideout, a safe house, or something more sinister? He took a step closer, trying to make sense of the scattered documents, when, boom! A deafening crack rang through the house as part of the ceiling collapsed in the next room, sending a fresh burst of flames surging toward him. The fire had found its way to this part of the house. He had seconds to escape. With one last glance at the mysterious room, Keanu turned and sprinted toward the exit, shielding the dog as embers rained down around them. As he leapt through the shattered window and landed outside, coughing from the smoke, the house groaned one final time before the flames fully consumed it. The mysterious room, and whatever secrets it held, was gone. Keanu sat on the curb, the dog still pressed against him, his mind racing. He had come in to save a life, but he had just uncovered something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The night air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke as firefighters worked tirelessly to contain the blaze. Water sprayed from high-pressure hoses, hissing as it met the raging flames. But the fire had already done its damage. By the time the inferno was extinguished, the house was nothing more than a charred skeleton of its former self. Keanu sat on the curb, his black jacket covered in soot, his breath still coming in soot gasps. The golden retriever nestled close to him, its body trembling but safe. Around them, neighbors murmured in hushed voices, watching as the last embers flickered and died. Then a frail voice broke through the noise. "Oh, my sweet boy." An elderly woman, wrapped in a knitted shawl, pushed through the crowd. Her face was lined with worry, but relief flooded her expression when she saw the dog in Keanu's arms. Keanu rose to his feet and gently passed the retriever into her arms. "I believe he belongs to you." Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the dog. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if I lost him." Keanu offered a small smile, but his mind was elsewhere. He glanced back at the smoldering ruins of the house, his thoughts fixated on the room he had stumbled upon. The locked door, the glowing monitors, the stacks of old files. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, do you live here?" The woman shook her head. "Oh no, it belonged to my nephew, but he moved out years ago. I just came by sometimes to check on it." Keanu frowned. There was a lot of equipment inside. Surveillance, documents. "Do you know what it was used for?" The woman gave him a puzzled look. "Equipment? No, dear. That house has been mostly empty for years. Just a few keepsakes left behind. Nothing else." A flicker of unease settled in Keanu's chest. He had seen that room, it was real, but if she was telling the truth, then someone had been using the house for something she knew nothing about. A firefighter walking past overheard their conversation and stopped. "Excuse me," he said, his face partially covered in soot. "But did you say there was a hidden room?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, in the back of the house. Looked like some kind of surveillance station. Files, old maps, monitors." The firefighter's brows furrowed. "That can't be right. I've seen the blueprints of this house. It was a single study structure. No basement, no hidden rooms." Keanu's stomach tightened. "I'm telling you, it was there." The firefighter exchanged a look with his colleague. "Well, if it was, it's gone now. The fire took everything." Keanu glanced at the wreckage, his mind racing. Someone had left that room behind, and if the fire wasn't an accident, they had made sure to erase it before anyone could find out the truth. One thing was certain. He needed to dig deeper, because whatever had been in that house wasn't meant to be found. And now, he had unknowingly stepped into the middle of something much bigger than he had imagined. Keanu sat in his dimly lit living room, his laptop open, fingers drumming against the desk. The events of the past 24 hours weighed on his mind. The fire, the hidden room, the surveillance equipment that wasn't supposed to exist. The firefighter's words echoed in his head. That can't be right. There were no hidden rooms in that house. But Keanu had seen it, and now it was gone. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Keanu Reeves," the voice on the other end said, amused. "Didn't think I'd hear from you outside of a film premiere. What's going on?" "Hey, Joel," Keanu said, leaning back in his chair. "I need a favor. a big one. Joel Hastings was an investigative journalist and an old friend. If anyone could dig into the history of that house, it was him. Keanu gave him the details: the fire, the locked room, the classified-looking documents, the strange reaction from the firefighters. Joel listened intently, and when Keanu finished, there was a brief silence before Joel spoke. "That address sounds familiar," Joel said. "I'll check property records and see what I can find. Give me a few hours." Keanu exhaled. "Thanks, man, I owe you." 3 hours later, Joel called back. His voice was different this time. Low, serious. "You were right," Joel said. "That house wasn't just some random property. It was once owned by a guy named Charles Mercer." Keanu frowned. "Should I know that name?" "You should, if you followed classified military intelligence reports," Joel replied. Mercer was a contractor for an undisclosed government agency. He worked on surveillance operations, counterintelligence, and black site logistics. And then, one day, he vanished. No trace, no explanation. Keanu's grip on the phone tightened. "And the house?" Joel hesitated. "From what I've pieced together, it was likely a safe house, maybe even a surveillance post. If there were old files and operational equipment inside, it means someone was still using it, or hadn't cleaned it out before abandoning it." Keanu stood, pacing the room. "So you're telling me I just walked into a government ghost site, and then, conveniently, a fire wipes it off the map?" Joel sighed. "That's the part that worries me. A place like that doesn't just go up in flames by accident. Someone either wanted to destroy evidence or send a message." A chill ran down Keanu's spine. "Listen," Joel continued, his tone urgent. "If I were you, I'd be careful. You stumbled onto something bigger than you realize, and if someone did set that fire, they might not be happy that you got out with more than just a dog." Keanu glanced at his jacket, where a small, charred file folder sat hidden beneath it. He had grabbed it without thinking in the chaos. Just a few sheets of paper, slightly burned at the edges, and now he needed to know what was inside. Keanu sat at his kitchen table, staring at the small, charred file folder he had pulled from the burning house. He hadn't opened it yet. Something in his gut told him that once he did, there would be no going back. The golden retriever, now named Lucky, lay curled at his feet, resting peacefully. The dog had been the only true innocent in this mess, caught up in something it had no part in. Keanu wished he could say the same for himself. His phone buzzed. A new text message. "Unknown number. You saw too much. Walk away." Keanu's skin prickled. His eyes darted to the phone's screen, scanning the short, chilling message. No name, no context, just a warning. He exhaled slowly. Someone knew what he had seen. Someone knew he had made it out with more than just the dog. His heart pounded as he looked back at the file. With a deep breath, he flipped it open. The pages inside were partially burned, but still readable. There were surveillance notes, names, dates, locations. A pattern emerged as he skimmed through. The house had been used to watch specific individuals, some of whom Keanu recognized. Former intelligence officers, high-profile whistleblowers, even a few Hollywood figures. Why had this information been left behind? And why burn the house instead of just taking the documents? Keanu knew one thing for sure. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. Someone wanted to erase everything inside that house. But they hadn't counted on him going in. They hadn't counted on him walking out with even a fragment of what was inside. His phone buzzed again. Another message, unknown number. "This is your only warning." Keanu's grip tightened around the phone. He could walk away, pretend he never saw the room, never found the files, go back to his life, his movies, his quiet existence. But deep down, he knew that wasn't an option. He looked down at Lucky, who stretched lazily before curling back into a ball. The dog was safe now. That part of the story was over. But for Keanu, it was just beginning. He picked up the file, grabbed his keys, and stepped toward the door. If someone thought they could scare him into silence, they didn't know him very well, because now he had to know the truth.